Hey guys, I'm here with the Kawasaki H2. Really happy to be on this bike. It's been a long time coming. I've been wanting to review this bike for such a long time, and now finally after all this time I'm able to do it. And we've been working directly with the handheld manufacturer to bring you guys the protocol to be able to flash this bike through the OBD port. That means no ECU, no pulling out of the front, no headaches. I know the wiring harnesses are a nightmare. Pulling out of the cage is a nightmare on this bike. It's so much easier just to plug it into the tail of this bike, get the flash, and then email it over instead of pulling this whole bike apart. A lot of people won't even flash it because it's so much work to pull the ECU out of this thing, but now we have the opportunity to do it, so let's do this review. And I have a little treat for you guys too. We have an H2R that we also tuned. So this is an H2. The H2R is more of the race version. It doesn't have a headlight, isn't supposed to be registered for the public streets. It has more power. I mean, it has different camshafts. There's a lot of differences between that bike and this bike, but aesthetically, they almost look exactly the same. Almost like when you saw a 21 M1000RR versus a 21 S1000RR. It's really just some wings and livery, but that's all it is on the surface. On the bottom, it's a whole bunch of other stuff underneath the surface. So now we got this thing. I'm going to do the stock review here, and then we're going to take it to the dyno, and then I'm going to take it to a 60 through 130, and we're also going to compare it to that H2R and see how this lines up with the power curve of an H2R. Same bike, same day, same everything. So it's a direct comparison I don't think anyone's ever done on YouTube before. So if you want to skip ahead, there's chapters at the bottom. You can go ahead and skip ahead. But I'm going to start reviewing this bike right now, let you guys know what this thing's like stock. Stock, it's like this is like a limousine of bikes basically. It's huge, it's big, it's cumbersome. It did go to, well, the H2R version of this bike went to Isle of Man Tourist Trophy, and they tried to really solidify it, but you know what, the M1000RR just beat cheeks on it, and it has the actual record over there at Isle of Man. Even though this thing had a wild top speed on the straights, it's just not meant for really turning. And anyone that argues that with me, hey, good luck. I would love to see this thing in World Superbike, Moto America. I'd love to see it anywhere really, other than straight line tracks and on the street for doing roll racing. But I mean, for what it is, it's amazing. It is amazing going straight, nice and comfortable. The seating arrangement on this is beautiful. The clip-ons are a nice level. Everything is super comfy, even though we're on a sport bike. It reminds me much of the Hayabusa, the 1300 Hayabusa, and it just has a super comfy stance, riding position. This one's stretched. It has about I think a 60-inch wheelbase on it right now, which is really good for roll racing and stuff like that. Also, they added an Olin shock with reservoir, and it's set up halfway decent to the point where I can at least get a little bit of a launch on this thing, and it doesn't just blow the tire right off of it. So that's awesome, but I think once we flash it, it's going to blow the tire off. So we'll see what we can do, basically. So this is a 1000cc bike with a supercharger slapped on top of it, and Kawasaki used the name H2 almost as a namesake from the 1972 throwback, which they had another bike called the Kawasaki H2, and it was powerful then. And it was named that way as, quote, they said, to awaken a sleeping motorcycle market, you know, to inject some thrill back into it, basically. And I think that's what this bike does. It raises the bar, and while in stock form, yeah, 200 horsepower, it's probably getting its cheeks clapped by leader bikes that are NA stock. When you tune this thing, it is a different story. And the way a supercharger works, just so you guys know, is it forces air into the engine. Now, it's a parasitic drag on the engine. Think of it almost like an air conditioner on a 4-cylinder car. When you turn it on, you almost feel the engine lagging, and you step on the accelerator, it's almost like it is lagging. That's exactly what this does. It uses parasitic drag on the engine to spin a turbine, basically. It's a centrifugal on this one, not a PD style, and it forces air into the engine while the engine's forcing the turbine to spin. It's kind of ingenious. Turbos are another way for forced induction, but turbos actually use exhaust gas that has already been used by the engine, so it's not any parasitic drag. It's using means that are already used by the car, but it has to produce exhaust gas, so that's where turbo lag comes from. But that's another story. Anyway, it's a very interesting bike. It has all these beautiful sounds. The bird like whistles, and you can hear it go like whistle every single time you rev it. It's pretty cool. Even when you shift, and this one has a blow-off valve on it, so you can hear you hear that exhaust, or sorry, you hear the air coming out. Right there. It's always coming out, basically. It's a pretty cool little little thing they added to this bike. This one is stock except for that blow-off valve, of course. It has a pipe, and it has the stretch. It still feels pretty quick down low. Up top is where it just starts laying over. That's where I think I'm having the problem with this bike right now. To give you guys an example here. Here we go. Look at this. You guys heard right there, that was not the clutch slipping, that was the tire slipping. So I got a lot to work with on this bike for 60 through 130, especially after the mod. That's going to be a little bit of work for me. But you can hear the bike definitely has some good pickup up top, but then when it gets up top it lays over, and that's the throttle restrictions that everyone hates on this thing. So we're going to be working on that and getting rid of that, and then we're going to go back out and see what she's like after this thing. So I think the first thing we should do here is give this thing a good shakedown, 60 through 130, and see what she does. All right, it's now time for the stock 60 through 130 Kawasaki H2. Let's see what this thing does. I'll do it at first gear start since the bike is stretched. All right, first gear, everything she's got. Alright guys, and that was a 4.6, 60 through 130, 4.66, and that was leading in first gear. That's all this bike has, and it's kind of disappointing to think that, and I do a 4.0 on a stock wheelbase S1000RR, that I did one pass on. You know, I mean, I could probably get that thing to threes. But yeah, this thing definitely needs some help. 4.6, it's laying over up top. You can see on the graph there where it just starts laying over. I even shifted when it started laying over. That's the sad part. So it was being shifted, not even at the worst part of the RPM. I could have kept it going till it hit the RPM limiter almost, and it would have done far worse, maybe a 4.9 or something like that, maybe even worse than that. But I gave it the benefit of the doubt. When a normal person would feel the bike falling on its face, they'd probably shift. They wouldn't just keep laying into it. So that's exactly what I did. So I gave the benefit of the doubt here to the stock 60 through 130. Let's get this thing over the dyno. I'm going to try to sort a few things I'm not liking about this bike right now, like this jerky throttle and the shifter. We'll see if we can enable some race tools. So let's get to the dyno. We're over here at Lee's in San Diego, and look who showed up. We got Kay over here with his H2R. He brought it over here to compare it against the H2. And we've got the H2. This bike is so beautiful, man. He did everything this thing right. Like, look at this. Even he's got green bolts here. He's even got the green custom bolts here. Even in the shock. I mean, this thing is really done right. Even the carbon. Yeah, green titanium bolts. Sorry. We've got full carbon subframe. I mean, he's done everything right to this bike. It's so gorgeous. Beautiful example of an H2R. You see right there. No headlight, nothing. Just zoom in here. Just air filter. Beautiful. And we got the H2 here in the dyno. Bren's working on this thing right now over here, and we're gonna see what the numbers are of this thing stock, then flashed, and then we're gonna throw a little bit of 85 in here, and hopefully what we're gonna do is make this bike beat that bike stock. We'll see if it does it. We're gonna get the numbers here in a second. All right, we got some numbers here for the H2, and they're looking good, looking really good actually. We've got our baseline here in red, and of course our mod file here in blue. You can see that's quite a gain. Just on the peak numbers, they were 38 wheel horsepower, but that's just part of the story because we are gaining a lot with that upper RPM. You can see how much we're carrying over that stock red baseline there, where it just kind of chokes on the fuel up there at the top falls off, and then you see where the blue line, that's our tuning, keeps climbing and going over and over. We have Brent here from BT Moto, and he's obviously the person that did all the work on the bike here for tuning, and he probably wanted to say a few words here about how he achieved the numbers here.
Sure. So we messed with this bike significantly to find like a happy medium. You can over time over rev and hurt these bikes, but there's a special, you know, happy medium where you can make great power and keep it together. So we played with a lot of the primary and secondary injection, which was tricky, and ignition to get like a fine, you know, good power curve. So, and obviously the most important thing is opening up the throttle 100%. So
here we got everything here looking good. These are great numbers here, and we actually just had an H2 on here right along. We didn't tune his bike, we just threw it on for power numbers alone, and that was it, and he made 228. So it was a good baseline. Of course, it's a well-known tuner that did his bike. I'm not gonna say names, because I don't wanna say, hey, we made more power than so-and-so, but his bike made 228, still a very respectable number. This dyno is a little bit of a heartbreaker, and we made 238, as you can see right there with the 200 baseline. So a little more than what we saw from the other H2, which was a 16. This obviously is a later model, so it does have a little more tricks and stuff up its sleeve. We're in the middle of working on this. I wanted to make sure this thing was done before we got K's on here so we can compare the numbers, but what we're gonna have to do is pull this one off, get K's H2R on, and then after that, we'll get this thing back on here and finish the tuning for it. So we'll come back to this in a second. Now we got K's bike loaded on the dyno here, the H2R, rated at 330 horsepower. We just did a stock baseline here. And it looks like we've got, what is this right here? About 247 wheel, and that was me cutting it off a little bit early just because, we cut off a little bit early just because typically the fueling likes to kind of curl up and goes lean a little bit, so we didn't want it to go lean. So we're gonna fix the fueling on it really quick and see if we can get something better than that 247 number, which is really impressive for a stock bike. I mean, it's bone stock, so it's pretty crazy. So let's see what we can do. All right, all wrapped up with K's H2R, and look at the numbers right here. This is insane. So stock we did 247. That's the stock H2R. This is a real H2R, guys, not like a replica, not a put together thing. 272 or 247 right there on stock, which is blue. You can see right there, blue, and then this thing just like gets drowned in fuel up top. You can see the curl goes over here and comes off, and this is all right around 14,000 RPM, whereas the bike's actually still pulling, but this actually gets so bad that you gotta let off the throttle. It starts popping and making all kinds of noise way up top. So when we fixed it here, we brought this all the way up to 272, actually 274 on one of the runs, but I didn't like the way it looked in the mid-range, so this is our best run right here of 272. K was actually sitting on the bike and made this number right here, 272. He was the one recording this actual pass right here. That's a massive gain. I mean, that's almost 30 wheel horsepower peak to peak, and we're carrying that power out there. So in the range where this bike is supposed to be, these are all gains. You see at the bottom there, even a little bit down there in the mid-range, around 5,000-6,000 RPM. You'll probably notice that while he's riding around. Just slow stuff, but up top here, that's the meat and potatoes right there. That's everything. About 30 wheel horsepower. Pretty good stuff, right?
Yeah, definitely. I was disappointed in the start because I thought the H2R should be doing 270s, 280s bone stock. So what the hell, Kawasaki, was going on here? But definitely seeing the difference in the gain, that like made me at least a lot happier. And it definitely, even just from doing the 1/6 gear runs on here, check it out on Instagram, by the way. We're getting a collab on that. But even on that, like, it felt crazy the way it was pulling, you know. It's, I guess, a little different, but I'll be testing on the road soon.
Yeah, on the way home, he's gonna make his own video here on the ride home, because this is his first ride, long distance first ride. He rode it about 70 miles here. He's gonna ride 70 miles home on an H2R. 80. On an H2R, yeah. Guys, on the street, H2R. So
top me off with gas, please. You have some more?
Yeah, we got some for you. So we're gonna go ahead and let him go now, cut him loose. He has to get out of here pretty early to beat the traffic, but look out for his videos where he will be reviewing it on the way home, how it feels, all that stuff, as well as a long-term ride for an H2R. It's the first I've seen. So now we're gonna get the H2 back on here and see if we can beat
at least his baseline number of 247. I don't think we're going to beat 272, but 247 may be possible. We'll see what we can do with the H2 here.
I think that's possible. I think so, because my H2 did 252 stock. That's why I was disappointed in this. So I think you can get like an H2 to upwards to how this was stock.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. All right, guys, done with the dyno here on the H2, and we finally have that comparison here with K. Here's the comparison. We have got the H2, which is in, red, and we have the H2R, which is in blue, and you can see the H2R down low due to its camshafts. There's a few other variables here, but it loses power down low. The bike actually feels super smooth, the throttle down low, everything like that. But you can see we're losing 14 wheel down low here, just in the mid-range, 5,000–6,000. This is where you normally cruise, but we're talking H2R here. That's not where this is supposed to shine. Due to its lower compression ratio and things like that, we have it climbing up top past the H2. So the H2R in blue there, climbing past the H2 up top to gain about 10 wheel more. Now keep in mind, the H2 bone stock tuning, that's the 247. We made more than that, of course. We made about 25 wheel more than that with just repairing the feeling, but this is just a bone stock H2R versus our tuning on the H2. You can still see the H2R still gets 10 up top, bone stock versus a tuned H2. This is exactly how I would expect it to look, because a lot of race bikes you see, especially like the V4R versus the V4. The V4R is going to carry up top, and the power band is going to be massive compared to the V4, which in the mid-range, the V4 wins all day, every day against the V4R. So interesting comparison, and I'm glad we got the bikes out here to do this. Cool stuff. Can't wait to get this thing on the road and test her for the after.
Guys, now we're back here on the tuned Kawasaki Ninja H2. And I've been riding this thing for, I don't know, just a couple miles, and it really is a handful now. First gear is essentially useless. The quick shifter is smoother now. Downshifts are much smoother. Everything's nicer on the bike. The throttle transition is smoother as well. But now we're getting more of that grunt as we saw in the dyno there. I thought it was interesting when you saw the H2R, for example, versus this. The H2 actually made more power down low in the mid-range, kind of like what you see from a V4 versus a V4R. So the H2R makes more of its power up top, which makes sense. It's a race bike with low compression. It's going to really sing up top, and it goes over this bike. But then you look at the bottom end, and you know, if you're doing light to light stuff, and this bike will actually be more fun light to light than it would be for an H2R. The H2R is going to be a lot more smooth, a lot more relaxed, light to light, a lot more composed. And maybe some people like that more. For this bike is going to be definitely more power and torque down low because of just the way the engine is set up on this bike. Useless power. Useless power on this bike. It's blown. Get quiet here. I mean, I'm definitely gonna recommend a different tire to the owner here. I'm not just gonna blow this tire out for them, but this tire is completely useless now. Light to light, it's fine if you're just cruising around, but if you're actually trying to take this thing seriously and race it, useless. I'm gonna have to start out in the second gear on that 60 through 130. Only way I'm gonna be able to do this. So I'm pretty pleased the way the throttle is now, the way the bike behaves. The power it's alarming. It pulls hard and you're like, okay, this is hard, and then it pulls harder and harder and harder, and the more you go up in the RPM, the harder it pulls, which makes sense when you have a centrifugal supercharger, because the more RPM you give it, the faster it's going to go. And that's also another problem with some of the tuners with this bike. They get a little overzealous. Man, the shifter's so much smoother. They get a little overzealous and they add too much RPM onto the bike. And this is a bike you cannot add too much RPM onto. That's how you put a hole in the side of this thing, or, you know, destroy the engine basically. This bike isn't meant for an extreme amount of RPM. It's meant to be tuned safely and get rid of the throttle restriction. It's good to go. But we have a full tune here on this thing. We even did a full tune on the H2R. You saw the H2R make 275 versus this thing at 238, which is very impressive. I mean, it's all up top. If we did a race in this thing, I'm sure this thing would walk away right off the hit, and then you see the H2R just sail by it where it's supposed to, right up on the top, and it would just keep on going and going and going and going until you couldn't see it anymore, basically. That's what that bike is meant for. It makes perfect sense to me. But light to light, this may be a better bike. Like, I've always liked the V4 versus the V4R, just because I'm not a track only guy. I take my bike on the street, and that's why the V4 really shines. You get all that torque, you get that bottom end grunt. Whereas the V4 is a little bit soft down there, but up top it's an absolute animal. Just cruising this bike around, very civil, very civil. It's when you start giving it throttle, that's when you start having problems with it. So we can get a spot here where I can give it a little bit of juice. Thing just sounds like a blow dryer going down the road. And it's so unbelievably loud. Obviously when you're forcing air into the engine, you have more exhaust now. And it amplifies the exhaust note, which is, I mean, for an inline 4, this is probably the best sounding engine for an inline 4 in my opinion. And if you get the V4 stuff, I'd say the Aprilia RSV4 is probably the best sounding engine there. I think I'm going accidentally to SeaWorld. Make a trip to SeaWorld. Let's try to get out of here. Oh my god, it's quick. It is quick. Beat that light. That's how quick it is. It's like nightmarish power. Even in the mid-range it feels like a lot of power, but up top it feels like, oh my god. It starts scaring you up top. So I think it's time to get that 60 through 130, see what she does after, and see how much of a compliment it is to that 4.6. I think we're gonna get in the threes with this one, guys. All right, here with the Kawasaki H2, it's time for the after or post flash 60 through 130. What I'm gonna try to do is just do a second gear run through it so it's easy on the tire, because this isn't exactly an optimal tire for a 60 through 130 on a stretch bike. So let's see what she does. And you guys saw it, 3.9 seconds 60 through 130 versus that 4.6 we started out with. Extended RPM we gave it, along with of course the throttle restriction removal, timing, fueling. I mean, we have a full complement of things, plus we added the race tools onto the bike here, which means we get the better quick shifter, etc, etc. I mean, I've already explained that. We even get launch control in this thing too, enabling that. And it is, wow, this thing is fast. It's a handful, okay? And that was leaving, keep in mind, in second gear versus even the stock I did in first gear. So we have a massive handicap to that first stock launch versus the after. I mean, it's insane. When I tried to do first gear on this, you guys saw, it was useless. Just blew the tire right off the bike. Completely useless. So there's no point in doing first gear on it. So I went to second gear, which is obviously not as fast as first gear, and it still ran a 3.9 in second gear, guys. Now if I got a proper tire on here and a little bit of seat time, this thing I could see mid threes, no problem. And even with the suspension set up properly and everything, I think this thing can go deep into threes, a little bit of lightweight stuff and things like that. Let's see what I got here for second gear. Dear Lord, the bike is fast, and it feels, this is like in its perfect home on the freeway, cruising around, straight line stuff. I mean, this bike is lowered, so of course it has the advantage of that, and of course it feels better going straight to those turning because it is lowered. But man, this bike really feels amazing right now, and it's really prominent. A lot of people look at this bike and they'll just kind of look it up and down and go, oh my god, that bike looks crazy. Yeah, it does look crazy. I mean, it's got this green swing arm. I mean, everything on this bike is wild. And no one really knows how to identify it. Really, only bike guys know that this is an H2 and it's a supercharged bike and what it really means. But this bike is insane. And now we're cool. We're holding a much better temperature. I haven't seen it go to 200 yet, actually. It was, the fans were a little too high stock. Now they're definitely lower and it's feeling a lot better. The bike just overall is smoother, and of course that comes with fueling. The bike was drowning in fuel stock, and now we've corrected that, and now it's a lot better. So the bike overall feels much better, and of course people that already have their bike flashed, they know how H2s are. They know what a flash does. It's not like a new thing to flash an H2. We aren't the first. We're just the first to flash it through the OBD port. So the OBD port, and I'll make a video on how to pull out your wiring from the OBD port because from the factory they kind of hide it. It's very easy though. You just kind of pull off the lock, pull off the back, you pull up the back seat portion that you can reach into already with the key. And then there's two Allens in there that you just kind of pull out. And then you gotta fish around, and then there's two cables that come out. One cable is going to be black, and that's going to be for your ABS. One cable is going to be clear, and the clear one is going to be for flashing the bike. It's really that easy, and it reads and writes. It'll read the whole tune out of the whole thing, and then it'll write the whole thing too. It's really amazing, foolproof stuff. So we just made this process a million times easier for customers, especially when they have to cut their cages out of the bike just to kind of reach in there and stuff like that, to flash it multiple times. Now you can just flash it from the handheld. You don't have to worry about that wiring. I know these wiring harnesses D-pin, for example, if you pull it out in and out too much out of there, it's just very sensitive stuff. So now we don't have to touch the ECU anymore. Don't even have to. It's all through the port back there, and we're adding, like I said, the race tools, the shifter, the smooth throttle, the fueling, the D-restrictions, the launch control. I mean, we're adding so many things to this as far as the features go. It's pretty crazy. So I think that's going to wrap up the review here. I mean, it speaks for itself. The bike's running really amazing right now. And even compared to the H2R we tuned, it's running pretty amazing. And it's kind of a coin flip on what you'd rather have. I mean, if you're always taking this bike up to the top, and you always want it more and more and more, get the H2R. But this bike, you can make easily, when you mod it, you can make it as fast as an H2R, much power as an H2R. Just takes a little bit of money, that's all. But it's almost there with the Flash anywhere. I mean, with the Flash, even with what we have now, which is almost 240 wheel, this bike is a handful. Like, I'd get used to that first and then worry about more power, but it's a lot of bike. Some people may just get off this thing scared and not even want to ride it anymore. It's that wild. So again, thanks for watching, guys. Like and subscribe, which I've never said before. If you do like the content, please do something, you know, to let us know you like it and to keep doing stuff, and let us know about videos you'd like to see too in the future. So see you guys in the next one.